A reading from the letter of St. James. Dearest brothers and sisters, all good giving and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no alteration or shadow caused by change. He willed to give us birth by the word of truth, that we may be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. Humbly welcome the word that has been planted in you and is able to save your souls. Be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deluding yourselves. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
I long for other vocations. I want to be a warrior, a priest, an apostle, a doctor of the church, a martyr. I would like to perform the most heroic deeds. Like the prophets and doctors of the church, I should enlighten souls. Like prophets, wander through the world, preaching her name, and not be satisfied until I've been a missionary in every quarter of the globe, till the end of time. And above all, to be a martyr, not just to suffer one torment, but to suffer all. This comes from the autobiography of Saint Therese, you may recognize perhaps. And Therese, in her life, she experienced this tension in her vocation. We hear about this desire for her to accomplish great heroic deeds, to give herself entirely to the Lord, to be one of the champions of Him, to save countless souls. But then in reality, finding herself called to the cloister, the silence of the cloister. So there was this tension, to be drawn into the world, but called to stay. So through her reflections in prayer and in Scripture, she eventually comes to a resolution of this tension. She writes, "At last, I have found my vocation. My vocation is love. In the heart of the church, I will be love." In reflecting with God, praying with the Lord, and looking into herself, she discovers at the very heart of her being, the foundation of her being, love, as God has built her. And not just to love others, not just the act of love, but to be love. At the foundation of her being, that's who she's called to be. And that's some of what St. James is getting at in this letter. He says to welcome the word that has been planted in you. The word planted in you is love. And St. James urges us to welcome that word humbly. Now, this word humbly doesn't quite get at what his original word is. The Greek word is proutes. It's a virtue, which Aristotle also describes in his Ethics. And this virtue is one when someone has a truly teachable spirit, someone who has perfect control over everything that would prevent him from seeing, hearing, and obeying the truth. Someone who is teachable without any sense of pride, resentment, or anger. So a better way to translate this word would be with three words: humility, docility, and gratitude. This word love, to welcome it with humility, docility, and gratitude. And St. James says that the word is planted in us, not just placed. So if we do welcome it with this virtue, it can grow like a living thing, go from a word to a phrase. I love you. And that phrase then is at the core of our being, the core of who we are, as St. Therese realized. That we exist because we're loved, and we're loved because we exist. So in that phrase, we want to welcome with humility, docility, and gratitude, and allow that phrase to become a fuller sentence. As I love you, so you must love one another. If we welcome and accept that love from God, we then cannot help but love others. The love is at the core of our being. That means that everything that we do is going to be motivated by that love. The great works, like St. James mentions, caring for the orphans and the widows and those in affliction. But also the smallest of acts. And Therese gets at that. She writes further, later in the autobiography, "The only way I can prove my love is by scattering flowers. And these flowers are every little sacrifice, every glance and word, and the doing of the least of actions for love. Every word, every glance, every gesture, every moment is to be motivated by and directed toward love. Every instant, God offers us an opportunity and a challenge for love, which we can welcome with humility, docility, and gratitude. Even in this very instant, right now, He is offering you an opportunity, or perhaps a challenge, to love. And if we welcome that with His virtue, the sentence can become a paragraph as we begin to influence others. It becomes a chapter, eventually the story of our soul, a story written by and for love. But there can be typos in this story. There can be plot holes. If we don't welcome the word as we're supposed to, if instead we receive it with resentment or pride, envy, attachment or possessiveness, all of these things get in the way of allowing love to write the story. The story that is love. The story which is of the God who is love. And of this God, St. Therese continues to write, concluding her autobiography. Out of His love, Jesus Christ could bear away every soul and plunge them into the heart of the Blessed Trinity, that inextinguishable furnace of love. If we welcome that word with humility, docility, and gratitude, if we hear it and do it, we too are consumed by this fire of love, and we allow Christ to spread that fire through us. That then is the greatest, the most heroic deed of all. To be an instrument of Christ, to plunge every soul into the heart, into that very love that is the most blessed Trinity.